Hello everyone, welcome back to Fanblade. Well, haven't I had an interesting few months? You can probably see, based on the fact that you're looking at them, 3 Rickenbackers, or I should say, 1 Rickenbacker 4003, 1 Ibanez lawsuit era copy of a Rickenbacker, and 1 more modern Chinese copy. We are going to do a 3-way shootout comparison, etc. of all of these. We're going to look at the hardware, the electronics, the construction, the necks, the frets. We're going deep into what makes all of these things tick, and hopefully seeing if either of these can match up with this one. Spoiler alert, no, of course not. But we're going to see how close they can get, because there's some interesting stuff going on here. I should also preface this whole video by saying that Rickenbackers are difficult to get in New Zealand. We've never had a distributor here. There is one music shop that would bring them in privately and then sell them at a huge price. You know, they're just almost impossible to find. They're almost impossible to pay for, and the fact that I have, well, even one of them on my bench is frankly amazing to me. The fact that I've got these 3 lined up just fills me with a sense of joy that I can't even begin to describe. I find these basses sort of oddly captivating. They are weird, but in a good way. They sound amazing. They look unreal. They play a little bit... Oh, well, some of them play better than others, and we'll get into all of those details later on. But let me just say that for everything that there is to hate about a Rickenbacker, I can find an excuse to love them. So let's dive in. We'll start with the Ibanez lawsuit era one, because that's the first one that I came across. So what we are looking at here is a mid-70s Ibanez Rickenbacker 4001 copy. I say 4001, I'm actually not sure. I don't have a 4001 to take measurements off, but these measurements are different to my 4003, and we'll compare all of those as we go. This bass I found for sale in 2010, and I scraped the bottom of the barrel to get it together to buy it, because I had come to the conclusion that as much as I dearly wanted a real Rickenbacker, I was never going to find one in this country, and then when this one came up for sale, I just jumped on it with both feet, figuratively. Unfortunately, in 2011, there was an earthquake which pretty much destroyed most of the city that I live in. So in order to pay for somewhere to live for a while, I had to sell this bass. Now, luckily I was in a band with a drummer who was sympathetic to my plight, and he bought it from me, and ever since then he's refused to sell it back to me. Yeah, he lets me borrow it occasionally. I borrowed it earlier this year, and we made this music video, which you'll see up in the corner up there. And then that lit a fire under me that I wanted my Rickenbacker back, and he wouldn't sell it to me. So I then set about finding some other ones, and we'll get to those as we go. But if this had been sold back to me at the time earlier this year when I was really into it, then the rest of this video wouldn't be happening, because I would have bought this, been happy with it, and that would have been the end of the story. So anyway, let's look at the details of it. It is quite light. It is bolt-on neck, which you do not see very often. It has got the signature cutaway there and around the base there, which is what you would expect to see. This is not a one piece. This is a piece of veneer, either a veneer or a bit of plywood or something on top, top and back. But the actual construction of it, it is made up of multiple pieces of wood. I believe I added it up. It's about a 17-piece construction. So that's a bit weird, and it is very, very cool. Let's take it apart, take some measurements, and then we can compare what we find with the other basses as we go. Now it's it's had stainless steel strings on it, roto sounds by the look of it. Not the best. Just in general, stainless steel strings, you want to save those for when you have stainless steel frets. If you have ordinary fret wire, which would be a copper and nickel alloy, nickel strings. And I have got 3 sets of nickel wound Diodarios that I'm going to be putting on all of these basses so that we can do accurate sound comparisons between them when it's time. So this all looks pretty standard for the time. We've got 500k pots, A and B pots. A is for tone, B is for the volume, which is backwards from how it is these days. Nowadays, A is the logarithmic one, so you would have that on your volume, and B would be linear for the tone. At some point, those designations changed, and now nobody knows what's what, including myself. Aside from that, yeah, you've got 2 pickups coming in. Where are we? No, those two pickups coming in to their volume. Have the tone across that, and of course grounded then to the switches, which then goes off to the output jack down in there. The pickups on this thing are from a company called Maxon, and they made a lot of pickups for Japanese guitars, so anything that's branded Ibanez from that era, or Graco, or anything else, basically anything that came out of the Matsumoku factory, or possibly even Fujigen, will have a Maxon pickup in it. And the way you read the code is that the first digit is the basically the factory code, the second digit is the year, in this case 1975, and then it would be June. In fact, the 12th of June 1975 was the day that they made this pickup. So that would date this whole bass to 1975, which sounds about right. Let's pull the bridge pickup out and see if that's anything similar. Of course, this bass came with the obligatory Rickenbacker bridge pickup cover, very much removed. It is in the case with this bass. In fact, I have the covers for all of these basses, but honestly, they just get in the way. I don't see why anybody would leave it on there unless they don't like playing other than in one particular spot. If they're happy with it, if they like the look, then yeah, good on you. But anytime you want to actually get the most out of a Rickenbacker or any bass, actually, remove the pickup covers. On a Fender, you can leave the bridge cover because I think that looks nice with a bit of chrome on there, but just pickup covers are a stupid idea. They should never have happened. And we've got foam. Not in bad condition, actually, for quite old foam. This foam might be a recent addition. But again, we've got the 6th of June 1975. So these pickups were wound about a week apart from each other. That's all good. That is excellent. So here's a close look at the bridge. It is a little bit dirty. I'll clean this up before I give it back to my friend. Effectively 5 screws holding it in, and that is a piece that sits in there like that. And it appears to be very weirdly set up. The intonation's looking a little bit wonky there, so we'll get some new strings on this thing and set it up. One thing I do have a complaint about these basses bridges, one of many, is they're quite heavy. In fact, on the Chinese one, you may have noticed, you'll see it in a second, I've changed the bridge out entirely because it was horribly heavy. So I'm going to weigh this one and compare it to the real one. 257 grams. I should probably write that down. I've just noticed something here. My friend will thank me for this because it means he's getting the authentic Rickenbacker experience. Bridge lift. That's not supposed to happen. The design of these bridges is such that, all the tension is pulling on a plate at the back here, and these will just lift. But you know, it's not fatal to the base, and Hipshot do make replacements that'll just drop into the wee cavity that's under here. So, you know, if he wants to replace that later on, he can. I thoroughly recommend replacing any of these bridges at any time, because both this one, the one that's on the Chinese one, and the real one, they're just awful. Okay, now we move on to this base here. There's a story to tell you about this one. There are a lot of factories in China. You can go through AliExpress and find multiple stores selling variations on this theme, because real Rickenbackers are so expensive and so hard to get. There is a market for people who want them. Like me, I wanted a Rickenbacker type base in my life. And so I did some research about different manufacturers, looked at their reviews and their ratings and so on and so forth, chose a bunch of people who made me this. And I requested several things. First of all, I requested the spalted maple top and originally spalted maple back. I'll get to that in a second. I wanted a slight curve over here. I wanted proper neck through, and it is. Ebony fingerboard, which it is. And I also requested that they do not put the logo on, because if there is one thing I do not do, it is counterfeits. This is a copy. It was not ordered to be a fake. They sent it to me with a blank truss rod cover on it, and I simply printed out the word chicken hacker. For reasons which will become apparent, things I wish I had said is, please don't make it weigh twice the weight of the sun. The first thing I noticed about this base when I pulled it out of its box was the sheer crushing weight of it. I don't actually know how heavy it was, because these scales top out at 5 kilograms. So it was more than that. It was probably closer to 7. It was just unplayably heavy. I did a little bit of research and found out what's going on here. So it has the spalted maple top and the and back, supposedly, but the core of it, and also this strip up the centre, which runs the entire length of the neck, I'll show you in a second, that, as far as I can tell from the wood database, the online wood database, is a wood called bloodwood. Now, just for comparison, I've just been on the wood database, and basswood has an average dried weight of 415 kilograms per cubic metre. Red alder is 450 kilograms. African mahogany is 640 kilograms per cubic metre. Bloodwood, this thing here, 1,050 kilograms per cubic metre. That is over twice older, nearly twice the weight of mahogany. This thing weighed just far more than any instrument should weigh. It was horrifying. So, I had to do major surgery. And what I did was I cut a massive amount of weight out of the back. This is all hollow with little, I left little bits of support in there. Now, it's an acrylic back with wood grain vinyl just stuck to it and then screwed down. Now, the screws were only ever meant to be temporary. I've introduced chambers into this. I didn't want to glue the thing on and then find out that I'd introduced some weird resonance or anything horrifying like that. So, the plan at some point is to take the screws out, take the back off, peel the vinyl off, glue the acrylic on, and then re-vinyl it. Should look nice and clean. It sort of gives it the illusion of having binding on front and back, which no Rickenbacker does in real life, but you know, at least the thing is sort of semi-playable now. And the final weight, pretty much 4.44. I'm going to call it 4.44. The original bridge that came on this base was just an appalling mess, weighing in at 453 grams. That's nearly twice what the one on the Ibanez weighed. I can't get pencils to work today. 453 grams. Now this bridge has every single problem that the Rickenbacker and Ibanez bridges has, and more. The actual saddles here have nothing actually holding them in. They do that. There's nothing holding them side to side, so they can move around. You have to take the strings off to get an Allen key in there to adjust the intonation. This thing is just the worst. It's just awful. And of course I replaced it with a Fender style one. Now unfortunately the Fender style bridge wasn't built to raise the saddles to the same height that you would expect. So all in all, it's kind of extended a little bit higher than you would want one of these bridges to go, but it is far more adjustable, it is far more stable, you can actually adjust the height individually. It's just a better unit to have on a bass, any bass. I'd rather have this any day of the week than that hot mess. The reason why I put the cover on is simply because that doesn't look all that attractive, and I think this body design, it requires more chrome in this area, so that kind of just sits it out nicely. The original neck pickup here was this horrifyingly awful thing here. This pickup is not only microphonic, but it had an internal rattle, which when you played some notes, something inside the pickup rattled, which because it's microphonic would then come out of the speakers. So this thing lasted about 4 minutes longer than the old bridge before I stuck a similar. I had a mini humbucker which fit sort of kind of nicely. Unfortunately, that was also microphonic, and sort of pretty much out of desperation, I grabbed this pickup, which is an EMG copy, just a cheap one, but I knew that I could find a Bartolini to fit the same hole. Now, luckily, I was able to just cut out the pickguard. The cavity underneath was already routed, and it just seemed to be the right size to fit that in there. Now, that seemed to work. That got one pickup going. The second pickup, a lot of people complained that the bridge pickups on these are too quiet. Now the reason why they're too quiet is because they are too far away from the strings. There's nothing wrong with the windings. I did measure it. I can't remember what it said. I can measure it again later, very shortly. But look at the size of these pole pieces. That thing's great. It just needed to be closer to the strings. So you take this entire assembly apart. There's two screws underneath that are attaching this to a backboard. I simply stuck a bit of wood in there, screwed it back together, lifted the pickup up another, what have I got, about another 8mm, close enough to the strings, gets a good signal. Between that and the Bartolini, this thing actually sounds very, very nice. Doesn't sound like a Rickenbacker, but it sounds very, very good in its own right. So, took care of the weight, took care of the setup, took care of the sound. The frets. The frets were horrible. In fact, I still need to do a little bit of work. I've levelled them and crowned and polished and everything, but that has left this edge, the edges of the fretboard are still a little bit too sharp for my liking. So there's still a little bit of work to do there. And aside from that, yeah. What else? Oh yes, the headstock. Yes, I've labelled this Chicken Hacker simply because a reference to it being from China and the fact that I had to hack it to pieces to make this bass any good at all. Note also the sheer width of the headstock. It's enormous. It's a lot wider than the other ones. I'll get proper measurements on that so we can compare it later. So there's not really that much different to see, except they've wired instead of wiring the caps between pots, they've simply wired the cap from the centre lug to ground, which is is pretty standard. You get that on most bases these days. Smaller pots obviously save a bit of money. Switch, nice and clicky, good quality switch. That I was kind of impressed with that. This, of course, is part of the process of taking the bridge cover off. Of course, that is mounted on these two screws here. These two screws are for the adjustment of the height. So you've got to sort of take the entire thing to bits. These two screws here are what are going through this piece of wood and into the pickup. Those two holes there. Yeah, that was just a really simple modification. What's really interesting to note with these is that almost universally people say these pickups are bad and that the neck pickups are good. I had exactly the opposite experience. This pickup is just a disaster, and this one has turned out to be actually very, very nice, very musical sounding pickup. So yeah, you never know what you're going to get with these until it's actually in your hands. Okay, so the stats are in. I'm going to run through all of these when I've got the whole set for all three bases, but I just want to mention the neck on this one. If I'm perfectly honest, the only reason, and this is just between you and me, the only reason I did all of this to save this bass is because the neck on this thing feels really, really nice. It's actually a very, very cool neck to play. It just fits my hand perfectly. So, yeah. I should probably check the packaging on these, because if I send in 3 barcodes, do I get a lunchbox or something? It's probably worth noting as well that the tuners on this thing are excellent. I did ask for them to please use high quality hardware, and the people who built it certainly didn't skimp. This was not one of those cheap $200 ones. This actually cost a reasonable amount more than that. Certainly a lot cheaper than a genuine Rickenbacker though. Alright, that's ready to go. Next up, the main event. This is a genuine 100% made in America Rickenbacker 4003 bass guitar. Holy moly, what have I got here? The story continues. Having gotten the chicken hacker and just been so disappointed with everything that I had to do to it, and then doing those things and having it come out as a pretty excellent bass guitar, I knew that I had something. I really, really liked it, but it wasn't a Rickenbacker, and that started to eat away at me, and I pretty much had reached the point where I was prepared to do whatever it took to save up the money, scour eBay, scour the Japanese auction sites, look everywhere I could, and just spend whatever I had to get one into the country so that I could have my Rickenbacker. It didn't quite work out like that, because 2 days after I'd had a little breakdown about it and decided that this was what I was going to have to do, damn it, this one pops up on the local auction site that we use in New Zealand. Is called Trade Me. It's just like eBay, but it's all sort of local auctions, and this one was 10 miles from my house. It was half the price that I thought I was going to have to spend to bring one into the country. It's near mint condition. It's a 2006 model, which the colour of the year that year was Amber Fireglow. So all of this yellowing here and the yellowing on the binding, that's all factory. This was the one that I wanted, and it popped up only 2 days after I decided that this was what I wanted. The odds of that happening are astronomically high. if you have a close look at the finish, you can see it looks all checked and cracked. Now, I don't know how well that's coming across on camera, but it's certainly not meant to be like that. This thing was bought by a person who wanted to get into playing bass guitar. I believe they played it twice and then it spent 15 years sitting in its case. Normally this kind of crazing on a finish is the result of an instrument being subjected to great changes in temperature, going hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold. The wood will expand and contract and the finish doesn't always go with it, so that can happen. So even though this thing sat in its case for 15 years, it must have been somewhere where there was a lot of changes in temperature. That's my best guess as to why it's happened, but I absolutely love it. It gives the thing, especially with the yellow binding and everything, it just makes the thing look a hell of a lot older than it is. It's like it's been relicked and there's not a scratch on it. It's incredible. It's nearly an identical arrangement on the bridge of this one as it was to the Ibanez. As I said before, the bridges are pretty much identical. You could probably even swap them out. They'd probably fit perfectly. Not that you'd want to. Unless you were swapping them out for something better. Now, this one has a problem in that I did swing a little too far while I was testing out the foam mute, and that's come loose. So hopefully I can just... Oh, okay. Ground wire is actually attached. That's a nice touch. That's a very nice touch. I approve. This bridge weighs 338 grams, 80 grams more than the Ibanez, but still a solid 115 less than the Chinese one. I've done the same thing as I did to the Chinese one. You take this entire thing off and the original pickup cover, which, incidentally, if you've never handled one of these before, the pickup covers are plastic. Who knew? Even the Chinese ones, metal. The American-made ones, piece of chromed plastic. How weird is that? That's the neck pickup coming in there. The inside of the neck pickup, by the way, what an odd-looking thing. That's at its maximum height as well. I can't. The screws and the springs in there are set to maximum. It's not really high enough, but it is what it is. Yeah, this is where things get weird, because these things are, of course, wired for stereo. They have the option, and to be honest, I would need to actually sketch this out and work out where everything is going. So this wiring is a little bit complicated. What we've got here is these two wires coming from the main electronics into the stereo jack. Now, these three are going into the mono jack, and this base is permanently wired in stereo until you plug the mono jack in, and this little nub at the end here forms part of a switch which bridges across the wires coming from the stereo jack. So if I push a jack in all the way, that's now shorted out. Effectively, that's shorted out all of these wires to form a mono connection with that jack. So that's how they work. They're permanently wired in stereo until you plug the mono in. This code here refers to the date that the body was actually put together. So 08 is 2008, even though Amber Fireglow was the colour of the year in 2006. That's how far they were backlogged back then. They're even worse now. If you order a brand new Rickenbacker today, you're going to be waiting a long time for them to actually build it for you. So, yeah, get your waiting pants on. Let's have a look inside here. One of the things about the bridge cover here is that A, it gets in the way, B, it's made of plastic, C, it just sucks in every possible way. So you take it off, but what that does is it leaves a huge gap. You've got all this gap here. Now, as I've been playing this instrument, one thing that I have discovered is that I really like resting my thumb about there, and what that means is that I am effectively pressing right onto the windings of the pickup. That's bad. really don't want to do that. So there is available a bezel that you can buy, if you can find one, which simply takes the place of the pickup cover, but it just basically fills in this area, and it's got to be cut out for the pickup itself. I can't really get one. The people who make them aren't really making them for lots of reasons. So in a future video, I'm going to be making a little one, possibly out of brass, because I think that would sort of suit the amber Fireglow thing. Or if I can find a nice piece of stainless steel, then that'll be... I can polish that up to match the chrome quite nicely. Either way, neither of them should be particularly magnetic. Maybe the stainless, I think I'd prefer to use the brass actually. So, but that'll be coming up in a future video, possibly even next week. Again, it's just a pickup mounted to a plate, which is then attached to the screws for adjusting the height, and the pickup cover is mounted underneath there, so you've got to take the entire assembly apart, get the cover off, put it all back together. Nothing really much to see it. There's a massive magnet on the bottom of that. That's all just one giant ceramic magnet. It's great. It's not particularly strong, but it is what it is. Certainly does the job. Right, I've redrawn my stats so that I can read my own writing. Let's start at one end and work our way down. We have the headstocks, just point to point across these here. That is 110, 118, so a fair bit wider, and 110 again. So the Ibanez wins this round. The nut width, we've got 43.2, 42.2, so pretty much bang on P-base specs there, and 44.5. That's wider than you really want, and the nut spacing bears that out as well. 10mm, 10mm, 12mm. It's quite a large neck, which is fine if you've got large hands. I have medium hands. The width at the 12th fret, now this kind of gets interesting because we've got 53.6, which is plus 10 on the nut. We've got 57.2, which is plus 15 from the nut, so quite, there's more taper on this one than this one. This is 55 just 55, so that's plus 11 from the nut. So again, the Ibanez has a much more similar taper to this one, whereas this one's more like a P-base. It's just sort of spreads out a bit further. And the thickness at the 12th fret is 24.5, 25.5, so a little bit chunkier, and 23.9, which is actually the thinnest. For inlays, we've got glitter set in probably in epoxy, and worth noting, the inlays go right to the edge of the fingerboard. We've got mother of toilet seat here. The inlays do not go all the way to the edge, and of course mother of pearl, only the best for Mr. Rickenbacker, right to the edge again. The radius is 14 on each of these, whereas this is 9.5, so it's considerably rounder. I hadn't actually noticed that much of a difference when I was playing them. If you'd asked me before I'd measured them, I probably would have said they were all 12. Nope. The frets, we've got, I'm guessing cupro nickel on this one. Cupro nickel is standard on this one. I requested stainless frets in this one. And I believe they gave them to me, although they didn't level them very well. Pots, 500k, 500k, 330k, which is absolutely fine. It's an odd value, but again, Rickenbacker like to do things their own way, and a 330k pot with a couple of single coils, it's a perfectly acceptable way of doing things. The bridge spacing, is 17mm here. It's 18mm here, which is consistent with the rest of the width. Basically, it's like a millimetre bigger all round. And the bridge spacing on this one, I've just drawn an angry face. The bridge weight, 258 grams, 338 grams, and 400. The original one, where is it? It's over there somewhere. 453 grams for the original bridge on this one. The body thickness is kind of interesting as well. 38.8, 43.5, and that is after I've added 3mm of plastic, so it still would have been the biggest one of the bunch, and this is by far the thinnest at 33.5. There is a full, even with the plastic on the back of this one, there is a full centimetre difference between this one and that one. It's quite remarkable. Scale length is 850, 842, so a bit shorter, but the genuine article is 844, so this one's actually closer to the scale length. And of course the overall weight, 4.189, 4.44, and 4.32. So this is the lightest one. This was never going to win that battle. So, there you have it. The only thing that's left to do is to take these off to the studio for a sound comparison test. I've laid down a drum track, and we'll see how these go. So there you have it. I will let you draw your own conclusions as to which one you thought was the best. Personally, for me, it's got to be the real Rickenbacker, but that's not to say these two don't have their charms. This one in particular has a very strong Paul McCartney game. Those humbuckers, just give it that sort of that creamy retro. It's just something about them. Good bass. I like this one. This one took a hell of a lot of work, but it is a fantastic instrument. It wasn't fantastic when I got it out of the box, but I did manage to turn it into a really, really good bass guitar. Your experience may differ. You don't know what you're going to get, and you're not going to get one of these. You're going to get something else. It's probably painted black and might be made out of lead. You just don't know until it's in your hands and cutting the circulation off to your leg. It's difficult for me to talk about the sort of the ethics of buying one of these when I've already bought one. I mean, we don't want frauds, we don't want fakes. I have to say here, I'm on Rickenbacker's side when it comes to this sort of thing. I understand where Rickenbacker are coming from, because by only making a certain number of instruments and charging whatever they want for them, they are keeping availability down, which is driving demand up. And for a business model, that's exactly what you want. John Hall knows that every single thing that Rickenbacker makes can be sold, and that's a great way to run a business. It really is. So, good on him for that. But as consumers and musicians and lovers of his design, we don't want these. We don't want these. We want this one. But we can't get one and we can't afford one, so something needs to be done. I think what we all want is we want John Hall to open up manufacturing to a third party. We would love to see Rickenbacker make a deal with someone, say Fender Japan, for instance, to put out a line of affordable Rickenbacker style basses, because there is a massive market for them, and currently that market is being filled by these illegal, inconsistent, and just downright fraudulent basses. That's not cool. If you are prepared to put in some blood, sweat, and literal tears, then yes, you can get a decent instrument out of the Chinese ones of these. But the only one of these that I'm recommending that you buy is the genuine article. It really is just a huge step above these two, and it really shouldn't be any other way. Wow, that's a long video. Right, thank you everybody for sticking with me this far. I'll wrap it up here. I'll just say thank you very much for watching right to the end. Thank you very much for subscribing. If you've got comments, and I'm sure you're going to have comments, then comment away. This is going to be a very, very interesting and illuminating conversation, I'm sure. So, yes, thank you all. I'll see you next time. Cheers.